Hi there. Welcome to this lesson on Pure Mathematics 1. We're on Chapter 2, looking at quadratics. This is part 2 of a lesson on completing the square. And in this lesson, we'll look at how you use completing the square to solve quadratic equations. I think we'll start straight away with an example for you to have a go at yourselves. So if you watch the first lesson, you should be able to have a good stab at this. So have a go, complete the square on the left-hand side, then try and solve the quadratic equation, having done so. Pause the video, come back to me when you're ready. Okay, we'll have a look at this together. So first of all, we're completing the square on the left-hand side. We look at the x squared and the 6x initially, and that'll give us x plus 3 squared in the brackets, 3 because it's a half of 6. If I square that bracket, I will get the x squared that I want. I'll get 3x twice, so that gives me the 6x that I want. That's what you're always doing, setting up a bracket to give you the first two terms correct. But I'll also get a constant. I'll get 3 times 3. 3 3s are 9, so I need to take that 9 away because I don't want it. It wasn't in the original question. Plus 4 was, so I do want the plus 4. Now that's the completing the square bit. A little bit of tidying up. That'll give us minus 5. Then the 5 swaps sides in the equation. Becomes plus 5 on the other side. And this is the reason for completing the square for this type of question. This is a perfect square on the left-hand side, so I can square root this, and I can also square root the right-hand side. So that's what I do, square root both the left and the right-hand sides. That gives me x plus 3 equals root 5, and I do need to remember it could be plus the root of 5, but it could also be minus the root of 5, because minus root 5 times minus root 5 is also plus 5. Last thing I need to do is move the 3 to the other side, and that gives me the two solutions. X equals minus 3 plus root 5, x equals minus 3 minus root 5. And that is how I'd write down the answer. You could write it as a decimal, but nearly always it's preferable to leave it in surd form. Okay, have a go yourself now at these 3 questions. They do steadily get more difficult as you move down them. The second one's harder because of the odd number here. The third one is harder because of the 3 in front of the x squared. I'll give you a heads up on the best way for dealing with that. Divide everything by 3 before you start. Okay, 3 questions. Pause the video. Come back to me when you're ready. Okay, let's have a look at these together. X squared plus 4x minus 7 equals 0. We complete the square on the x squared plus 4x. That gives us x plus 2 squared. It gives us 4 that we don't want when we square that bracket, so we need to take it away. We do want the minus 7, so we have to remember to write that down. Those two numbers get added together to give us minus 11. The minus 11 swaps sides to give us plus 11. And then we square root both sides. That gives us x plus 2 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 11. Last thing that happens is the plus 2 swap sides. That gives us the two solutions, either minus 2 plus root 11 or minus 2 minus root 11. Second question, a little bit more fiddly because of the odd number here. When we half 5, we get 5 over 2. Leave it as an improper fraction. Don't write it as a decimal. Don't write it as a mixed number. Makes it a lot easier if you just leave it as that. Now, when I square that bracket, it'll give me the x squared, it'll give me the 5x. Those things are both fine. But it'll also give me 5 over 2 squared, which is 25 over 4. So I have to take that away because I don't want it. What I do want is minus 3, so I have to write that down. Adding those together, a little bit of fraction work gives you minus 37 over 4. Then it swaps sides. That gives you plus 37 over 4. Then you square root both sides. That gives you x plus 5 over 2 is equal to plus or minus root 37 over 4. Now at this point you should notice something inside the square root. The bottom number, 4. That is a perfect square. This always happens with these questions. So that 4 can be square rooted, and that is what I do on the next line. So root 37 over 4 becomes root 37 over 2, because the square root of 4 is 2. The only other thing I need to do is move the 5 over 2 to the other side, and that'll give me x equals minus 5 over 2, plus or minus root 37 over 2. And this next thing also always happens. 2 is the denominator on both these fractions. That means I can combine the fractions together if I want to. I don't have to, but probably the neatest way to write down the answer is to join them together into one fraction, which would give me minus 5 plus root 37 over 2, and minus 5 minus root 37 over 2. Third question. Okay, the tricky bit on this question is the 3 in front of the x squared. Do not be tempted to square root the 3 and put it inside the brackets. In the first lesson, we factorized to deal with the number in front of the x squared. With an equation, you could do that, but it's not the best thing to do. It's not the easiest thing. The easiest thing is just to divide everything by 3. Divide the left-hand side of the equation by 3, divide the right-hand side of the equation by 3. Everything. And any equation will still work. So if I divide through by 3, I'll get x squared plus 8 divided by 3x plus 2 divided by 3 is equal to 0. Now we need to complete the square. Bit fiddly. You've got a fraction here. We need to find a half of that fraction. To halve a fraction, double the bottom number. I'll say that again because it makes life so much easier if you remember it. To halve a fraction, double the bottom number. So double the 3 to get 6. And that gives us x plus 8 over 6, all squared. From here on, it's the same as normal. I'll get 8 over 6 squared that I don't want, so I need to take away 64 over 36. I do want 2/3, so I need to remember to add that on. A little bit of fraction work to tidy those together. That gives me minus 10 over 9. That swaps sides, becomes plus 10 over 9. Then we square root both sides. That gives me x plus 8 over 6 is equal to plus or minus 10 over root 9. Now, if you remember from the last question where we had 4 on the bottom, this time we've got 9 on the bottom. But again, we can square root it. So we do. And the other thing to notice over here, we've got 8 over 6. Well, that could be simplified to 4 over 3. So we'll do that as well. Moving it to the other side gives us x equals minus 4/3 plus or minus root 10 over 3. Again, as before, we've got a common denominator. So we can combine these together into a single fraction if we want to. Don't have to, but it's probably neater if we do. And that'll give us minus 4 plus root 10 over 3 and minus 4 minus root 10 over 3. Now that brings us to the last question today. The last question is an interesting question. It is a lot more difficult than the questions you've just been doing, but it is worthwhile having a go at. You'll notice that there are no numbers in this question. We have the general quadratic equation, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. To solve it, you use exactly the same method as we used on the last example. To deal with the a, we divide everything by a. And then the method, the technique is identical to what we just did. Now this question is quite a lot harder than you need to know for pure 1 in the A level. Very, very few students manage to solve this without some help from someone else along the way. But I'll let you have a go yourselves first. If you succeed, you will know you succeeded because the answer that you should get at the end is the quadratic formula. X equals minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. If you manage to get there, you have succeeded, and you have every right to give yourself a substantial pat on the back. Pause the video, have a go. Okay, we'll go through this together. As I say, it's harder than you need for the course that we're doing, but it is good to understand this, and very nice if you're able to do it yourself. First, we divide by a. Dividing by a gives us 1x squared plus b divided by ax plus c divided by a. 0 divided by a is 0, so there's no issues on the right-hand side. The next thing is looking at this fraction, b over a. We need to halve it. To halve a fraction, you double the bottom number. So the a is going to get doubled to 2a. So b over 2a is a half of b over a. Just normal completing the square feels strange because you've got letters instead of numbers. I'll get b over 2a all squared that I don't want, so I'll get minus b squared over 4a squared to cancel that out. I do want c over a, so I mustn't forget it. That'll give me that. As before, there's a little bit of fraction work, but it's algebraic fraction work now. So we want to add together these two fractions. We can get a common denominator of 4a squared. And if I do that, then adding these together will give me minus b squared over 4a squared, that's the first term, minus 4ac over 4a squared, which is the second term. Now, beware of the change of sign. I've got plus here, and I've written minus there. That's because I've got a minus outside the fraction. So I'll actually get a minus times by a minus when I do that second term. So that second term does simplify to c over a. Now that's the hard bit done. From here on, it's relatively straightforward. This swaps sides and becomes plus b squared minus 4ac over 4a squared. Already, you should be thinking this looks very, very like the quadratic formula. Feels like you're heading in the right direction. Square root both sides. On the left-hand side, I will get that. On the right-hand side, I'll get plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. That should sound familiar. Divided by 4a squared. Well, we don't normally get that. But as with the other questions, this is a perfect square. So I can square root it. The square root of 4a squared is 2a. So bringing this over to this side, I'll get minus b over 2a. And then I'll get plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a when I square root that bottom term. Again, as before, we have a common denominator. So these can be added together to give us one fraction. And that single fraction is the quadratic formula. X equals minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. As I say, that is a lot harder than you need for pure mathematics 1. But if you were able to do it, if you do understand it, then well done to you. That brings us to the end of this lesson. If you have the textbook, go to page 24. Have a go at exercise 2D. Thank you very much for listening, and cheerio.